This is a village in India, and it's located right inside a meteor crater. So why did they build this village here? And what actually happened to this meteor? Well, let me tell you all about it. This village is called Lonar, and it's found within a small crater in the western state of Rajasthan. And the reason that this village was constructed here might surprise you. The crater itself is 50 million years old and was formed when a meteor, roughly 50 meters wide, slammed into the earth with such force that it left an impact crater over 5 kilometers wide and 240 meters deep. But over time, this area became a lake, and then it filled up with water, and it eventually turned into a wetland. Now, in the 18th century, this lake started to dry up, and the local king decided that he wanted to make it into a new town. So he ordered his army to drain the remaining water from the lake, and then they built a town inside the crater. And even though the lake had dried up by the mid-19th century, the British government at the time still saw the potential in this area. And so they declared it a wildlife sanctuary in 1857 and made it off-limits to everyone. But after it became clear that this was hurting the local economy, they opened it back up again in 1969. However, they also began research there because this meteor crater provided a rare opportunity for scientists to study the history of our planet like never before. For example, the lake bed itself consists of 3 distinct layers. There's the bottom layer, which contains older rocks that were pushed up from beneath the surface of the Earth during the impact. Then there's the middle layer, which is made from shocked quartz and pieces of meteorite. And finally, there's the top layer, which is full of debris that was blasted out of the lake after the meteor hit. And because each of these layers are perfectly preserved, they're helping researchers learn more about what life was like on Earth tens of millions of years ago. Plus, by studying these rocks, they can also work out the chemical composition of the meteor that caused it all. And the results may shock you, because it turns out that this meteor didn't just come from space. Instead, it was part of the same asteroid belt that killed off the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. So the discovery of this meteor was extremely important because it gave scientists insight into what life was like on Earth following the mass extinction event. In fact, one recent study found that mammals living near this asteroid impact survived relatively unscathed, while those further away took a bit longer to recover. And it was until about 35 million years later that mammals repopulated the region and then spread out across the rest of the world. So this meteor played a key role in the evolution of mammals and ultimately led to the rise of humans. There's even evidence that shows that this meteor impacted another place on Earth just 13,000 years ago. It happened near the town of Chaco Canyon in New Mexico. And even though this meteor was much smaller than the one that wiped out the dinosaurs, it still had an impact on human history. That's because it landed in the middle of one of the largest archaeological sites in North America. And it helped shape the development of Native American culture for centuries to come. It happened during the Archaic period, which was a time when nomadic hunter-gatherers started to settle down and form communities. They lived in villages and grew crops, and they built homes from stone and wood. And as you can imagine, the impact of this meteor would have been huge. In fact, archaeologists discovered pieces of charcoal that date back to the day the meteor struck. And since there were no large wildfires in the area at this time, they believe that this was caused by the meteor itself. The meteor burned through the dry air like a massive rocket and scorched the landscape below. And although there were no human settlements nearby, its impact likely triggered a series of cascading effects that reached all the way to the Pacific Ocean. For example, some scientists think that the dust from this meteor could have blocked sunlight and led to a volcanic winter. Others believe that the impact may have caused earthquakes or tsunamis. But we don't know for sure because, unfortunately, very little research has been done on this topic. That's partly because this meteor was so small that it went mostly unnoticed by modern scientists. They only realized the next year that there was a connection between the two sites, when they found pieces of shocked quartz in the New Mexico soil. And when they analyzed these samples, they learned that they were identical to the quartz found in the lunar crater. Suddenly, it all made sense because this meteor probably broke apart after hitting Earth for the first time, and then one of the pieces came back to hit Earth again. But there's still so much that we don't understand about the relationship between these two sites. And without further investigation, we'll never know what kind of impact this meteor really had on early humans. But there are plenty of other mysteries surrounding this crater, too. For example, the town of Loner is home to around 4,000 people who live in permanent houses and make their money by farming and raising livestock. But there's also a small group of people who live inside the crater, and they've built their homes out of the rocks and sand that were blasted out during the meteor impact. They're known as the Bishnoi people, and they were originally nomads who traveled from place to place. But after the lake dried up, they settled down in this crater and started building their own villages. Today, they live in small huts made out of clay and wood, and they spend their days collecting firewood and selling it to the tourists who come to visit the crater. But they don't live there alone because the crater is also home to a variety of animals, including antelopes, birds, and wild boars. Even though this area is very dry, there's still enough water to support a small ecosystem of plants and animals. And this makes it an ideal habitat for many species of birds, including peacocks, ducks, and geese. But it's not just the wildlife that's thriving here. This crater is also home to a number of ancient Hindu temples, including one dedicated to the god Vishnu. These temples are usually built out of stone, and they're decorated with intricate carvings of Hindu deities. And even though they're hundreds of years old, they're still used by local people for religious ceremonies and festivals. But it's not all peaceful here because this crater is also home to a number of poisonous snakes, including cobras and vipers. These snakes are a common sight in the villages, and the locals have developed a deep respect for them. They believe that these snakes are sacred and should be treated with reverence. In fact, snake charmers are an important part of the local culture, and they travel from village to village performing tricks and entertaining crowds. But the biggest threat to the people living here is probably the weather. This crater is located in a very dry part of India, and it receives very little rainfall each year. This makes it difficult to grow crops and raises livestock because there's not enough water to go around. In addition, the summers here are extremely hot and the winters can be cold and dry. But despite all these challenges, the people living here have managed to make a life for themselves. They've rebuilt homes and raised families, and they've rebuilt a unique culture that's unlike anywhere else in the world. So the next time you look up at the night sky and see a shooting star, remember that it could be the last thing you see. Because just like the people living in this crater, you never know when your time might run out. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.